When talking about surviving a zombie apocalypse, schools are one of the top places mentioned. And in my last video, Are Prisons Good in a Zombie Apocalypse, it was definitely one of the most recommended comments in my video. Maybe people think schools are a good idea because they offer some real benefits to survival that you wouldn't get somewhere else. Maybe it's because it's shown to be possible in zombie movies and TV shows. Or maybe it's because we spent a majority of our younger years there and it's rooted in our subconscious to believe it's safe. So today, we're going to figure out if school is a viable option to survive the zombie apocalypse, or if it's just some wishful thinking that will likely end up getting yourself killed. This is Zombie Survival Labs. So schools, we went there to get an education, eat lunch, socialize with friends, and sleep in study halls. We spent a majority of our childhood here, letting it mold us into the person that we are now today. But if society was to crumble and an apocalypse event were to happen, like a zombie apocalypse or something realistic like the solar grid shutting down, could a school be a viable option to survive in? To answer this question, we need to figure out our pros as well as the cons to figure out if it's a good idea or not. And a big thank you to everyone over at my Discord for sharing their information about their school so I can get a consensus on what your average high school is. Before we start looking at the pros and cons, we need to set some ground rules so that way we are all on the same page. The schools that I'm going to be referring to are your generic everyday high school. So if your high school has barbed wire fences, is out in the middle of an island somewhere, and just happens to have firearm training courses, we're not talking about your school. Just your average, everyday high school. As far as zombies go, I'm going to be referring to The Walking Dead as a reference. So no sprinting, wall climbing zombies. So now that we got that out of the way, what are the pros to surviving in a school during a zombie apocalypse? One of the first things that has everybody gravitating towards surviving in a school is the fact that it offers good shelter. It's a large space that's occupied by hundreds of students and dozens of faculty members. Some would even go as far as to say it's built like a prison. It's not built like a prison, but I can see why people like to compare it to a prison. Strong walls, fences, and strong doors. It keeps you warm when it's cold out, dry when it's raining, and it keeps you protected from the elements. Because schools are primarily occupied by children, extra measures are taken to ensure their safety in case of natural disasters like earthquakes and tornadoes. This means that schools are built to be stronger and more durable than your average building. And the only thing that's scarier than the undead knocking at your front door is a group of pissed off mourning mothers suing the school district because it wasn't able to withstand a level 3 tornado and Timmy had to pay the ultimate sacrifice. Proof that we built schools to be tougher than your average building goes all the way back to 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis, when we built actual fallout shelters in schools. We don't anymore, but it goes to show that we take the safety of our children very seriously. I had this bit where I was going to say, I guess school really is tough, but can't find my glasses, so cutting that out. Another pro is food. With hundreds of students to feed 5 days a week, that dry stock and cooler is going to be a literal gold mine during an apocalyptic event. School lunches might not be the most appetizing, partly because of low budget and the fact that they're packed full of preservatives. But those preservatives means that the food is going to last you plenty of time to get that farm up and running. The average high school has about 400 students and food is delivered weekly to schools. So if a school happened to close down because of an apocalyptic event right after a delivery, that's at best 2,000 meals, assuming that all the meals are dry stock. That's a lot of food and a lot of time before you run out of that food. But regardless of how much food is at a school, you still need to get a farm up and running. Thankfully though, another pro is that a school has a ton of space. Almost every high school has a football field or some designated sport field. So this would be a good place to start planting seed and growing crops. But honestly, this is more of an aesthetic choice because you realistically could just plant a farm anywhere where there's open space available. It doesn't have to be at a football field. But damn, does it look good. So you got plenty of space on the outside, but you also have a whole lot of space on the inside as well. Classrooms can be switched over to bedrooms, to shops, to storage areas, and more. With schools being on average 75,000 square feet or 7,000 square meters, that's a lot of space you can use to your advantage. But schools aren't just big, they have a lot of supplies as well, more than what people like to give them credit for. From mechanical equipment at the bus shop or auto class shop, to medical equipment at the nurse's office or medical academy course. High schools typically have a variety of vocational courses which offer you some great supplies that you can use or you can loot. Regardless of what vocational courses your school has, that's materials right there already for you that you won't have to go out and scavenge for. This is going to give you a decent head start in the beginning stages of an apocalypse because you won't be spending so much time scavenging. Instead, you'll be spending that time building. Security is something that's important as well, and a school offers it. Most school doors, when closed, automatically lock from the outside and can only be opened from the inside or unless you have a key. And this is obviously a good thing because you don't want people just randomly walking in. But before they're able to get to those doors, most schools typically have fences and gates around their perimeter. So not only do they have to make it in the doors, but they have to make it past the fences first. Cracking down on school security and school safety has been a concern in the community for a while now, especially with recent events. And schools deal with this by having buzzers on main entrances, cameras, and even having on-site officers. And to add to the security aspect of it, a lot of schools have rooftop access. So having rooftop access gives you a great vantage point to oversee the perimeter. You have fences to further guard that perimeter, and then you have doors that automatically lock from the outside to stop people from getting in if they pass that perimeter. So it seems like a pretty solid plan. Another benefit to surviving in a school during a zombie apocalypse or just any apocalypse is the fact that it's in a prime scavenging location. Typically, most schools are smack dab in the middle of a township and surrounded by residential properties. Or if it's not residential properties, it's on the outskirts of rural areas. This means that the surrounding area is going to have a decent sized pool for looting options. Homes, gas stations, small convenience stores, restaurants, and almost all are within walking distance. But this isn't exactly a benefit of the school itself and is more of like a secondary benefit. This is just because you could pick a property right next door and this benefit would still apply. It's more of a benefit of the area itself and not the school itself. But even though I won't be adding it to the list of pros, it's still something to consider. Think of it as an honorary mention. School generators was also mentioned a lot on my Discord as a pro, but considering that you'd only get a week's worth of power even when running the bare minimum, it's too much of a waste of resources for such a short period to consider it a pro. Lastly, libraries was also mentioned a lot because it could have useful educational material that could aid you in survival. While that is correct, books will fall under supplies because it's considered a school supply. But anyway, I think that pretty much does it for pros, so if you think I missed anything, leave a comment down below. And before we get to the cons segment, make sure you leave a like on this video if you're enjoying it so far. But what are some of the cons that might not make it such a great idea? Probably one of the biggest cons that's going to screw your plans up of surviving in a school during a zombie apocalypse is the fact that schools are considered alternative care sites during disaster situations. What this means is when a disaster strikes a community like a hurricane or tornado, schools are used to treat and shelter citizens. In 2005, when Hurricane Katrina happened, many schools like Rutherford High School housed and treated its local citizens during and after the disaster. Now you might be thinking that's different because it's a hurricane and not a pandemic. But the truth is both situations are actually handled pretty much the same. Once a pandemic starts happening, the Red Cross and other similar foundations will begin running alternative care sites. This is so that hospitals won't have their emergency departments overwhelmed. When this happens, child daycare centers and K-12 schools are closed, making them perfect locations for the Red Cross Foundation or other emergency medical services. The same reasons that you're wanting to use that school for survival is the same reason that they want to use that school as an alternative care site. There's food on site to feed people and plenty of space to treat and house citizens. This is going to be a huge problem for you because with that school being used as an alternative care site, that food reserve is going to run dry, essentially causing the con to cancel out the pro. The cons, unfortunately, don't stop there. Most people don't want a large group when surviving in an apocalypse and much rather have a smaller, tighter-knit group. And this is absolutely fine, except a school is way too large for that. Your group is going to have an average of 75,000 square feet to protect and defend. And all that space to oversee is going to create a lot of blind spots for you. While it might not be as large as the prison I talked about in my last video, 75,000 square feet is still a whole lot of space, especially when you consider that most people don't want to be in a large group and much rather be in a small group. Some people would argue though that you don't need to secure the whole building and you only need to secure a portion of it. This, however, doesn't make a whole lot of sense because why only secure a portion of it when you can just secure the entirety of a smaller place? I mentioned earlier about the doors and fences, but honestly, those aren't going to stop very much. Your average school fence can easily be cut with bolt cutters, jumped over, or just drove through. Some people say that there's walls around their school, but we're talking about the average school, and even with walls around the school, you can still climb over them. And while you can somewhat argue those points, what you can't argue is the windows of a school. With hundreds of windows almost always within arm's reach, someone is just a rock away from being able to get inside of the school. As much as people like to say school is built like a prison, it's not. It's nothing like a prison. But let's not also forget that schools are a hotspot. Not only are foundations like the Red Cross interested in using that school, but it's also not a very original idea. You're going to have a lot of people seeking out schools in a zombie apocalypse, maybe in hopes of settling down there or just to loot it. Either way, you're not the first and you most certainly are not going to be the last, causing more problems for you then it solves. Hotspots are places the common public already know about and may seek out during an apocalyptic scenario. So places like malls, stores, hospitals, or any other place that has an abundance of resources that the common public are aware of, which is exactly what a school is. Now that we have all the pros and the cons, I believe that we have enough information now to say just how good it would do in a zombie apocalypse. If I could rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being a completely horrible idea, 4 being short-term survival, 7 being long-term survival, and 10 being indefinite long-term survival, I would have to say it's a solid 3, maybe a 4. The truth of the matter is, for almost every pro there was a con to cancel it out. This means that it being a good shelter is pretty much the only solid benefit that a school has to offer you in an apocalyptic scenario. And when you're talking about an apocalyptic scenario, there's better places to survive. But what do you guys think? Did I miss any pros or cons? Let me know in the comment section down below, as well as other places I should talk about in my next video. Check out the other places I talked about, like my prison video, by clicking the link in the description or in the iCard. In the description, you can also find a link to my Discord, so if you want to join the conversation, you can join up there. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you want more videos. My name is Tyler, and I'll see you guys later.